This is the largest Black-owned business in Charlotte. New Black Mecca. Charlotte doesn't look like a Black wealth capital at first glance, but underneath the glass towers and corporate logos, there's a quieter reality most people miss. A network of Black-owned businesses shaping how this city eats, builds, hires, moves, and even cleans itself. From cultural power brokers to companies touching millions of lives daily, these are the Black enterprises turning Charlotte into a new Black Mecca. And the business at number 1, you've relied on it more times than you realize. Number 10. Black Wednesday. The Culture Translators. Let's begin our countdown with Black Wednesday, which is one of those companies you don't really notice until you start connecting dots. You'll see a restaurant suddenly everywhere, a local brand landing national press, a creative popping up at the right events, and eventually you realize there's a quiet common thread running through it all. That's where their power lives. Not in assets or headlines, but in strategic marketing and building lasting PRs. Charlotte's rise as a banking and fintech city created an interesting tension. You had Uptown filling up with corporate offices, capital, and influence, but very few people inside those rooms actually understood Black consumers in the city they were profiting from. Black Wednesday slid into that gap almost naturally. They didn't try to overpower the corporate culture. They learned how to speak both languages fluently, then decided when to switch. What makes their work feel different is that it doesn't scream for attention. They're not chasing viral moments just to flex creative muscles. They're shaping narratives quietly, deciding which Black-owned restaurants get national write-ups, which creatives get introduced to decision-makers, and which startups get framed as investable instead of interesting. In a city where visibility often comes before funding, that kind of influence compounds faster than people realize. I've always thought marketing agencies like this function more like social infrastructure than businesses. The money matters, sure, but the real value sits in proximity. Who calls you first? Who trusts your read on culture? Who invites you into conversations before they go public? That's how Black Wednesday has become a bridge between uptown corporations and Charlotte's Black creative ecosystem without ever announcing itself as such. Most people think power has to look loud or tangible. But in Charlotte, Black Wednesday proves that sometimes it sounds more like a whisper that travels exactly where it needs to go. And once attention starts turning into opportunity, the next question becomes obvious. Who's helping Black families actually hold on to it? That's when our next business jumps into the picture. Number 9. Pruitt Miller Realty Group. The Wealth Ladder Builders. If you've lived in Charlotte long enough, you've watched entire neighborhoods change personalities in a matter of years. Prices jump, bidding wars get reckless, and suddenly, people who grew up in the city feel like outsiders in their own zip codes. Pruitt Miller Realty Group exists right in the middle of that tension, quietly helping Black families navigate a market that hasn't exactly been gentle. Led by Daryl Pruitt, the firm operates where Charlotte's growth pressure is most intense: Ballantyne, South Charlotte, and the relocation corridors tied to banking and corporate expansion. These are the areas where newcomers arrive with strong salaries and aggressive timelines, which can push long-time residents to the margins if they're not prepared. Pruitt Miller stepped into that reality not just as brokers, but as translators of a different kind, translating opportunity into strategy. With more than $200 million in annual transaction volume, the firm has earned its reputation through consistency rather than flash. They focus heavily on first-time buyers, relocations, and move-up homes, which might not sound glamorous, but it's where generational wealth actually starts forming. A first purchase turns into equity. Equity turns into leverage. Leverage opens doors that weren't accessible before. What often gets overlooked is how much influence brokerages hold without ever owning property themselves. They control flow. They decide which buyers are ready, which listings get attention, and how quickly deals move. That kind of control shapes who ends up in appreciating neighborhoods long before developers show up with cranes and renderings. There's also a ripple effect here that's easy to miss. Pruitt Miller trains agents who eventually branch off, carry that knowledge into other firms, or start their own. That's how one brokerage quietly multiplies its impact across an entire metro area without needing a billboard. But not all wealth in a city shows up on spreadsheets. Some of it lives in places people gather without thinking twice. Number 8. Mert's Heart and Soul. The cultural anchor. Mert's Heart and Soul feels like one of those places that's always been there, which is funny considering how much of uptown Charlotte has been torn down and rebuilt around it. Step inside and you'll see politicians sitting next to tourists, executives next to locals, all eating food that carries far more history than most of the buildings outside. Founded over 20 years ago by Mert and John Bernard, the restaurant didn't just survive uptown redevelopment. It learned how to coexist with it. That alone is rare. Black-owned restaurants, especially downtown, usually don't get that kind of runway. Rising rents, shifting foot traffic, and changing city priorities wipe most of them out long before they become institutions. Mert's endured because it understood something fundamental early on. Location matters as much as flavor. Sitting near government buildings, hotels, and major venues meant a steady flow of people who were already in the city to spend money. Add national exposure, presidents stopping by, Food Network features, and suddenly the restaurant became part of Charlotte's identity, not just its dining scene. The menu leans into Gula Geechee traditions, but the operation runs with discipline. Tourism, catering, lunch crowds, and loyal locals all feed into a business model that's stable enough to weather cycles most restaurants never survive. That stability supports dozens of jobs and keeps Black-owned suppliers in the loop, even as Uptown continues to evolve. But while Mert's feeds Charlotte's memory, the next company on this list helps build the physical city those memories live inside. Number 7. McFarland Construction, From Trade to Trust. Construction is one of those industries where the loudest company in the room is usually the least trusted. Flashy websites don't pour concrete on time, and marketing slogans don't keep job sites safe. McFarland Construction figured that out early, and instead of trying to look big, they focused on becoming dependable. In Charlotte, that distinction matters more than almost anything else. Founded by Tino McFarland, the company grew alongside Charlotte's expansion into a real city. More offices, more hotels, more institutional buildings that actually have to work the way they're designed to. McFarland didn't chase every bid that came across the table. They leaned into repeat clients, long-term relationships, and a safety-first culture that made developers comfortable handing them bigger and bigger responsibilities. What's interesting is how quickly trust compounds once you earn it in construction. One clean project leads to another, then another, and suddenly you're not pitching anymore. You're being called. That's where McFarland found itself, riding Charlotte's population boom while quietly building a backlog most companies would envy. Backlog is the real flex in this business. Its future revenue already spoken for, already planned, already trusted. There's also a human side here that doesn't get enough attention. Construction has long been a gateway industry for Black wealth when access to capital was limited but skill wasn't. McFarland leaned into that legacy by building a workforce pipeline for Black tradespeople, creating jobs that don't just pay bills but teach transferable, long-term skills. In a city growing as fast as Charlotte, that kind of internal ecosystem becomes a multiplier. I've noticed that people outside the industry often underestimate how boring construction wealth really is. It's not about one massive win. It's about consistency, safety records, and delivering exactly what you promised, every single time. McFarland's rise is proof that in Charlotte, reliability travels faster than hype. But as impressive as McFarland is, here's how the next company on this list makes its money handling everything you don't. Number 6. Environmental Service Systems, ESS, the Invisible Empire. If you asked most people to name Charlotte's biggest Black-owned companies, ESS probably wouldn't come up right away. And honestly, that's what makes them look even more honorable. Environmental Service Systems has built an empire by staying out of the spotlight while quietly inserting itself into the daily operations of hospitals, campuses, offices, and corporate real estate across the country. Founded by Edgar Ruth and rooted in Charlotte, ESS took an industry most people associate with low margins and limited upside and treated it like a systems business instead. Cleaning, maintenance, and facility services aren't glamorous, but they're non-negotiable. Buildings don't function without them. During the pandemic, that reality became impossible to ignore, and ESS didn't just survive, it scaled. What separates ESS from smaller operators is how intentionally boring their model is. Recurring contracts mean predictable revenue. Predictable revenue supports payroll. Payroll supports scale. And scale, once achieved, creates leverage with clients that one-off service providers never get. This isn't a company chasing quick wins. It's a company stacking long-term agreements like bricks. Charlotte played a huge role in that growth. As a banking and healthcare hub, the city provided ESS with exactly the kind of clients that need reliability more than flash. From there, the company expanded into multiple states, carrying its systems, technology, and management discipline with it. That's how a local service provider turns into a national operator without losing its base. One thing that sticks about ESS is how massive its employment footprint is. Service businesses at this level become economic engines, especially for women and minorities. Thousands of jobs, steady hours, and upward mobility create stability that ripples outward into entire communities. ESS proves a quiet truth about wealth. The most durable money often comes from doing essential work exceptionally well, then repeating it at scale. You don't notice it because you're not supposed to. And then there's a very different kind of business, one where visibility is the product and timing is everything. Number 5. Don's Restaurant and Lounge. The volume play. Don's Restaurant and Lounge feels like a place that figured Charlotte out early. Not the polished brochure version of the city, but the real rhythm. When people eat, when they celebrate, when they spill out of arenas looking for somewhere to land. Sitting near the Spectrum Center, Don's doesn't wait for crowds. It intercepts them. This is a hospitality business built on volume and timing rather than novelty. The menu hits familiar notes: seafood, soul food, brunch staples, But the real magic is operational. Pre-game dinners, post-game drinks, late-night crowds, weekend brunches, private events. The space stays in motion. Tables turn. Patios stay full. Staff stay busy. Charlotte's nightlife economy is heavily event-driven, and Don's positioned itself like a toll booth on that traffic. Executives, athletes, tourists, locals, they all pass through. That density creates a revenue engine most standalone restaurants never touch, especially in Uptown, where rent alone shuts down half the competition before it gets momentum. What I appreciate about Don's is how intentional it feels behind the scenes. You don't get this level of consistency without discipline. Staffing, supply chains, scheduling, it all has to hum. That's where hospitality turns from vibe to business. Too many spots chase trends and burn out. Don's focused on being exactly where Charlotte already was heading. There's also a cultural element here that matters. Black-owned, Black-led, and unapologetically present in one of the city's most visible corridors, Don's helps normalize Black ownership at the center of Charlotte's entertainment economy. Not tucked away, not niche, right in the flow. But before lounges, arenas, and even construction contracts, Black wealth in Charlotte needed one thing above all else: access to capital. Number 4, Mechanics and Farmers Bank, the long memory of money. Before Charlotte became synonymous with fintech apps, glass towers, and overnight IPO dreams, there were institutions like Mechanics and Farmers Bank doing the unglamorous, stubborn work of survival. And survival here isn't a throwaway word. This is a Black-owned bank founded in 1907 that outlived segregation, redlining, recessions, mergers, and entire generations of competitors who assumed it would eventually disappear. The Charlotte branch matters because this city has always been a banking town first and everything else second. Being a Black-owned financial institution in that environment isn't symbolic, it's strategic. Mechanics and farmers carved out a role serving people who were routinely ignored or denied by larger banks, especially Black homeowners and small business owners trying to get a foothold in a rapidly appreciating market. What stands out to me is how quietly radical that is. When Charlotte real estate started accelerating faster than wages, access to fair lending became the difference between building equity and being permanently priced out. This bank didn't just process transactions. It acted as a stabilizer, helping families and entrepreneurs stay in the game while the city around them changed at warp speed. There's also something deeply intentional about longevity here. Mechanics and Farmers isn't chasing scale for headlines. With hundreds of millions in assets and deposits, it focuses on sustainability, literacy, and trust. Financial literacy programs, community lending, and relationship banking don't sound flashy, but they create something far more durable than buzz: continuity. In a city obsessed with what's next, Mechanics and Farmers represents what lasts. It's the connective tissue between past and future Black wealth in Charlotte, quietly ensuring that capital doesn't just pass through the community but circulates inside it. And once capital exists, the next step is learning how to deploy it at scale. And that's when we move to the next business in this list. Number 3. A. Everett Construction Group. Building the rooms where power meets. There's something surreal about sitting in an arena or institutional building and realizing the company that helped bring it to life is Black-owned, Black-led, and headquartered in the same city. D.A. Everett Construction Group occupies that exact space in Charlotte, not just physically but symbolically. Founded by Donovan Everett, the company scaled at a pace that makes people double-check the numbers. Major contracts, repeat institutional clients, a reputation for execution that earned trust in environments where mistakes are expensive and forgiveness is rare. Leading projects like the Spectrum Center renovation wasn't just a win, it was a signal. Charlotte's growth created a unique opportunity here. As the city poured money into sports, education, and public infrastructure, someone had to manage complexity, timelines, and stakeholder pressure. Everett stepped into that role and didn't let go. That's how you end up with 80% repeat business and a pipeline that stretches years ahead. What I find particularly compelling is how deliberately Everett uses scale. This isn't just about winning contracts. It's about subcontracting black firms, creating job pathways, and turning single projects into ecosystem-building moments. Construction at this level becomes a redistribution mechanism when handled intentionally. There's also a psychological shift that happens when a Black-owned firm controls projects that define a city's skyline and civic spaces. It resets expectations, not loudly, but permanently. D.A. Everett isn't an outlier anymore, it's a benchmark. Next up is a company that feeds the millions passing through it every single day. Number 2. Jackmont Hospitality, Charlotte Operations. Owning the in-between moments. Airports are strange places. Nobody plans to linger, yet millions of people spend hours there every day, hungry, distracted, and ready to spend. Jackmont Hospitality understood early that whoever controls those in-between moments controls serious money. With deep roots tied to the legacy of Maynard H. Jackson Jr., Jackmont's expansion into Charlotte Douglas International Airport is no accident. CLT is one of the busiest airports in the country, and airport concessions operate on a scale most standalone restaurants can't imagine. High volume, non-stop traffic, predictable demand. It's hospitality industrialized. What's impressive is how seamlessly Jackmont translates its Atlanta playbook into Charlotte's ecosystem. Minority partnerships, local hiring, supplier diversity, all wrapped inside operations that have to run perfectly or not at all. Airports don't tolerate inefficiency. That pressure weeds out anyone without systems. From a wealth perspective, this is infrastructure-adjacent business. You're not betting on trends. You're plugging into inevitability. Planes will land. People will eat. Revenue flows. Charlotte benefits directly here through jobs, tax revenue, and visibility for Black ownership in one of the city's most trafficked spaces. Every traveler who eats at one of these spots interacts with Black enterprise without even realizing it, which, in a way, is the point. And now, sitting on the very top of this list, there's a company that proves you don't need spectacle at all, just scale, systems, and patience. Number 1. Red Hill Ventures, where the money decides. If you blink, you'll miss Red Hill Ventures. And that's exactly how they like it. No splashy storefront, no billboards on Tryon, no viral founder interviews making the rounds. And still, from an uptown Charlotte address most people walk past without a second thought, this firm has been helping decide which ideas get oxygen, which companies get capital, and which futures actually get built. Red Hill Ventures sits at the very top of this list not because it's the loudest or flashiest Black-owned business in Charlotte, but because it operates where the leverage is highest. Private equity and venture capital are different animals from restaurants, construction firms, or service companies. They don't make money from volume or visibility. They make money from positioning, from being early, from being right, and from knowing which rooms matter long before everyone else hears about them. What makes Red Hill especially important to Charlotte's story is timing. As the city has evolved into a banking, fintech, and startup hub, capital has become the gatekeeper. Plenty of talent exists. Plenty of ideas float around. But funding? That's the choke point. Red Hill stepped into that gap, backing ventures in fintech, real estate, and emerging businesses that align with where Charlotte is actually going, not just where it's been. And here's the part people underestimate. Firms like this don't just fund companies, they shape ecosystems. Every check creates jobs, vendors, consultants, spin-off businesses. One investment turns into payrolls, leases, and entire supply chains. That's why their estimated $80 to $120 million in annual revenue hits differently than it sounds. It's not consumer-facing money, it's system-building money. I always find it telling that many people who benefit from this kind of capital never really know where it comes from. They just feel the effects. A startup that suddenly scales, a development that somehow gets financed, a founder who finally gets taken seriously in rooms that used to feel closed. That invisibility is part of the strategy. Quiet capital moves faster. In a city increasingly branded as the new Black Mecca, Red Hill Ventures represents the final evolution of Black business success. Not just ownership, not just scale, but influence over what comes next. Restaurants feed culture. Builders shape skylines. Banks provide access. But firms like Red Hill? They decide the direction. And that's why they sit at number one. Not because you see them everywhere, but because their fingerprints are already on Charlotte's future. So these were some of the largest Black-owned businesses in Charlotte. Which one impressed you the most? Let us know in the comments, and for more such insightful videos about Black wealth, take a look at the Black Status channel.